Away we go. So wait. Welcome to our last one. Welcome to all those at home watching later on demand. Let's open with prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the artist's eye that helps us to see things in quite different ways. And in particular, this Lent, how we've studied how they've portrayed for us Jesus from a variety of perspectives. Be with us this evening and help us to see the beauty and the salvation that Christ won for us in his cross. And through him we pray. Amen. Okay, so as I promised, we take quite a different turn. I came across, actually, I didn't go back to it. I came across a video describing one that was just before the period, but it kind of starts things off in this almost like picturing the crucifixion like a diamond, and you turn the diamond and you see a different facet to it that you didn't see before. And I can't remember the name of the painter. Like I said, I saw it during a video, and so I didn't happen to write things down. But it was something like In the Shadow of Death, and it actually wasn't on Good Friday. Jesus is standing up and stretching after a day's work in the carpenter shop. Mary is crouched down, looking away from you as the viewer, and looking in, and she sees the shadow that he casts on the wall behind him. And the wall is a carpenter's shop with all these tools. And so you have the shadow of his body on top of a cross shape on the wall. And I want to say there's some nails there too, but it was really an interesting twist on it. Where we're going to start as far as viewing things, if I can find my right buttons. And forgive me for my pronunciations, because I never took French in school. And it's all, I took Spanish, which doesn't help me with French pronunciations. But here we have James Tissot, I guess. And this is actually, oops, I want to use this. Come back. This, if you're looking at a computer monitor, is about all the large that it is. And this is, he worked in watercolors, which is just fascinating to me. My watercolors don't look anything like this. Never have, never will. That he could get so much detail into a picture this size. It's 10 inches by 9 inches is all. Where's the cross? So what Tissot does here is he puts us into the eyes of Jesus. And yeah, right? That just totally, like I said, it's like the diamond, you turn it and you see a whole different facet of it. And so if you look at the very bottom, you can just make out his feet. And they're very much twisted, like you would expect a victim to be. And you can see one nail going through both feet, or you might be able to make out there might be a second nail. I can't quite tell. It looks like they're on top of each other, but there might be another one right there. You can see a bit of blood streaming down. And I gotta admit that when I saw this, I'm like, wait. And so I stood up and I looked to see if I could see my feet. I could see my feet. I think I remember many years ago a Garfield comic strip where he was surprised to see he had toes because his lasagna-fed belly was obscuring it. You've got the three women. We'd figure Mary Magdalene down here at the foot of the cross, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and then also one of the other Marys, likely the mother of James, there with her. And I was looking at this one figure right next to them. I was thinking it was female, but everything I read said, no, that's supposed to be John. And I mean, you can see the headdress is a little different from the women, that is more wrapped entirely around their face. And there's no hint of hair from the front, though you do see Mary Magdalene's hair streaming behind her. But John, you do see some of the hair from him. Here on
I got sidetracked. Which one is John?
The one with the white.
Okay, gotcha.
You can see a little bit of the hair around it from his neck there, and green tunic underneath.
Gotcha.
Off to the side, off to our right side, so Jesus' right side, clay pots. Likely Tissot's idea was that was containing the sour wine vinegar, and you can see a little sponge and pull to lift it up. So let's scroll, zoom back out. You have the Roman centurion off over here. Surely this was the Son of God, as he says in Mark's Gospel. Then you have other soldiers, in a circular thing around Jesus. The Roman centurion has a very different look on his face compared. This is almost stoic. Kind of hard to read to me. He kind of looks maybe sad or puzzled. This one, I'm going to come back to their faces. This one looks like he's in middle of mockery. You have the Jewish Sanhedrin, and this one's very much a triumphant, we finally got him. And they're looking on behind. Although this one is like, okay, so he's seeing the darkness and in the signs in the sky, and he's wondering what's going on here. This Roman guard is different from the others. Just sort of looking on, almost looks like another day's work maybe. And then you have everybody else. Interesting that Tissot included the tomb, that it's open and ready to receive the body of Jesus. And I would suppose maybe the Mount of Olives. Tissot had a very interesting life. We'll just come back here. He wasn't very religious until, so this, we're figuring, let's see, I got this down here. Somewhere late 1880s, 1890s, and just not too long before this, I looked that up. What was it? He was born in 1836. So right about age 50 to age 60 was when he painted this. He was very much painting before this, but he wasn't so Christian. And apparently he suffered the grief of the death of his mistress, and went to, I didn't write it down, but went to a cathedral and apparently had a vision. And ever since that, then he turned to Christianity, and it became the main focus, the main subject. And this was one in a series of, did I write that down? No, I didn't write this down. One in a series of something like 250 to 350 paintings on the life of Christ. So, this was towards the end of that series. He traveled 3 different times to the Holy Land to get the sense of the geography, the topography of the land, to get the sense of the culture and the attitudes and culture of the people in order to paint his works. So this was informed by his own experiences in traveling there. There was something else. It is interesting looking at these faces. I mean, I already kind of commented a little bit on the soldiers' faces, but how so many of them suggest death. Either they're very pale and white, or they're like the soldier off to the left side over here. His face is very sunken. It doesn't look lively at all. So many of the people, you know, the eyes are obscured by shadow, and there's this hint, you know, I'm thinking especially this figure clad in white near the tomb. There's this suggestion of a skull there, you know, and a friend of mine recently on Facebook pondered, why is it that we have Calvary Lutheran churches, but we don't have Golgotha Lutheran churches when they both mean skull? um, anyway, that was the name of the place. So I'm almost curious if you know, was he making a theological statement with all these faces looking like death, or was he making a location reference with them being the place of the skull and having these faces look skull-like? Of course, as you get further away, then they become more generic and not descript. But then, like I said, he's working with watercolors, and this is even larger, you know, on my screen right now, this is even larger than what the real painting is.
Yeah.
So I'm still just impressed with his work.
Detail for that small of a painting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't even, with a pencil, I can't even draw that much in detail what he did with a paintbrush. Yeah, just remarkable. So this is currently at the Brooklyn Museum in New York City. They've had it in their collection for, I think, 30 years now. Let's see. French painter, lived in London. But then when it came to faith, he was living in France again at that point. Anything else?
Pastor, it's
Yeah.
interesting, the conversion experience.
Yeah.
Lew Wallace, the author of Ben-Hur.
Oh, yeah?
Wallace was a Civil War, he was a Union general, and after the Civil War ended, he set out to write a novel that would convince everybody that there is no God, because Wallace himself was an atheist.
Uh-huh.
And as he wrote Ben-Hur, he became a Christian.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've got a book on my shelf called Who Moved the Stone? And very similar, only his writing was going to be completely different. He set out to write that it was a person who moved the stone, and he was going to examine all the different possibilities and come up with who the most likely person was who moved the stone. Anyway, that's where he entered writing it, and he ended up saying it was the angels, because God got a hold of him in the middle of that and converted him. Just like you were saying there. Yeah, it set out, like Paul, to stamp out Christianity much more directly than in Ben-Hur, and ended up being a champion of the faith. Okay, so this is, okay, again, forgive my pronunciation, because this isn't even going to be close. Georges Henri Rouault, I'll go with. You can see his dates from 1871 to 1958. And Rouault was fascinating to learn about. I had never heard of him before. What's that one? Oh, that's the essay that I just read about him. Just fascinating. Let me punch that up some. Rouault had no conversion experience. He was Christian from cradle to grave. He had a apprenticeship working basically with stained glass window and painting on glass. And one of the articles I read about him said you can see that in almost like he's reproducing stained glass onto canvas. You know, that heavy dark lines that you see here being very much like the leaded glass and the lead that holds the glass together. You know, and forms and shapes that you might expect from a stained glass window. He wasn't very popular in his day. both just in the general art community and in the Christian church either. Though about 5 years before his death, the Pope recognized him and honored him as a painter of the faith. But he had I don't want to say obsession, but I'm going to say a fixation with painting suffering. And he had this beautiful quote, because when he painted suffering, it wasn't to drag people down, actually, but it was reaching out to the sufferer in order to lift them up. And this essay I read talked about how he'd be in his Paris studio and look out the window watching people, not aware they were being observed, and seeing them in their suffering. And many of his paintings will have a person or group of people suffering, but Christ will be somewhere in there. I think one of his paintings was Christ in the Suburbs, and it was this impoverished town and these two people walking, and Christ was walking right next to them. He has another painting very similar to this, as far as I could tell, 1 year later, that's much darker. But this one, even though the subject is the death of Christ, there's all this bright color to it. You can even see in the background, the sky behind, there's this like golden ray of sunlight, this hint of hope. And that was something that Rualt was very intentional about, wanting people to see in their suffering the hope of Jesus. And so Mark was on early when I was writing down this quote. He said one time, "Deep down inside the most unfriendly, unpleasant, and impure creatures, Jesus dwells." So he's, and this is what made him very unpopular, both with the artistic crowd and leaders in the church, was he was portraying suffering. And he would paint prostitutes. He would paint poor and lowly. And like I said, his reason for doing that was to reach out to them and say, Jesus is with you in your suffering. He's not far away from you. And so it was very popular in those days in the art community and in the church to have these upper crust type of the powerful, the rich. He really went against that idea that the wealthy were of course blessed by God. Not that we disagree with that. I mean, we would say, oh, everybody's blessed by God, but the idea in their day of that the wealthy must be, especially in natural man that thinks this, if your life goes well, God must really like you. And he was really painting against that idea, that if life is going horribly for you, God is with you. You see a little bit of that. Just remember all those crosses that we saw where they were high up, lifted way up above the people down below. Even we saw that in the first painting tonight, where Christ is looking down from the cross at people. We saw it with Cranach, that Christ and the two thieves on either side of him, their feet were above the heads of everybody. But here, Jesus is just a little taller than John, but he's standing there on the ground. And note too, where are the wounds of Jesus? They're off the painting. You get his feet there, and I guess you could have had a nail through his feet, but that's not there. His hands go beyond the painting. And it's a very intentional thing of his arms outstretched, in an almost a potential embrace, or in the almost an invitation, come receive my embrace to the people. The one that's darker, a lot of the same poses, but the John and Mary, and then Mary Magdalene kneeling down, looking a little different. In this one, their postures are very much one of worship and adoration. Um, Mary Magdalene kneeling in worship, John looking up in wonder and awe at our Lord. You got the nimbus, the halo behind his head, and where the darker one, Jesus' head is more slumped down. This one, it's kind of tilted to the side, but it's more upright, more a posture of strength. Let's see my notes. Yeah, the accessible Christ. His death is accessible to all. He did a series of paintings that very directly connected people's suffering to Jesus' suffering. One of them had the crown of thorns towards the end, and it was making reference to Isaiah 53, by his wounds we are healed. And, this is this picture for those who are wounded, and to see that in Christ's wounds, there's healings for those wounds that you're suffering from. The series of those paintings right around the same time, and we're here. What's this one? Oh, this one's 1914. It's one thing I have, although the darker one I saw said something like 1936 or 7, I think it was. So just on the edge of World War II, but just getting into it in Europe. Still not into it over in the States, but and that would have been a time when there was a great division between the haves and have-nots with the Great Depression. So you can think about the artistic community probably being more involved with that. If you're a successful and regarded artist and not a starving artist, you probably have a rich patron. Anyway, just his life story really drew me in, and I spent so much time reading about him that I kind of gave short shrift to the paintings and artists that came after this. But I think I really want to learn more about his life now, and it was just a neat painting. Let me zoom out, give you a little taste of some of his others. So this isn't the one I was referring to that's referred to, by his wounds we are healed, but it's actually very similar. So in the same piece of work, in the same Miserere, this is an earlier piece that later on he kind of duplicates. This is the Christ in the suburbs. And so you have the two figures walking in this impoverished town, and Jesus walking right next to them. This one's called In the Old District of Long Suffering. That again was from Miserere, and a mother there, impoverished town, one lone tree to give shelter as they're walking along. Let's see. There was one more I wanted to. Well, there's that one that we. The Head of Christ, and this was 1937. 41 by 29 and a half inches. So it's getting bigger. Did I write down this one? Yeah, the Passion that I just showed you. That was basically 2 feet by just under 2 feet. So a little bigger than what Tissot had. Anyway, it's just a fascinating painter for me. And so now, whoops. Marc Chagall. Where's? Okay. Oh, yes. Marc Chagall, not Christian, And so this one gives a very different answer to who do people say that I am. This was painted by Chagall right at the dawn of World War II, and as he saw the atrocities that were going on, one of the early people that was trying to tell the world what was going on um, through his work, he portrays Jesus in a very different way. Again, being not Christian, we wouldn't expect him to portray the Christ in a Christian way. He portrays Jesus as basically another example of the world's mistreatment of Judaism. And so all around, you have various instances of persecution of the Jews, from Jews being run out of town by this angry mob off to Christ's right, homes being burned, and Jews both escaping by boat here, and then these elderly men at the bottom here. Can I scroll out? Yeah, I can. This one in the dark blue or indigo, carrying a Torah scroll with him as they're escaping. Jesus is dressed in a different way, with a Jewish prayer cloth in place of the loincloth, and a Jewish headcloth in place of his crown of thorns. And if we scroll in, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews would be the Jewish inscription. So he goes very historical with that. Inscription in the Hebrew and INRI in the Latin again. Jesus Nazareth, King of the Jews. Does give a halo. Let's see how many. Okay, so he does have, for whatever that's worth, 4 nails to one in each foot. He was born in modern day Belarus, and so there's a flag off to the side there that would be have it on my notes. So this one of these flags is the Lithuanian flag up here. You have a symbol of the 10 Commandments and Star of David over here, the synagogue and the Torah scroll ark being vandalized and damaged as fire comes out of there. This green figure down to Christ's left side is very common in many Chagall paintings. It's believed that it could be the prophet Elijah, though a little bit unsure. Woman escaping from the torment that's going on behind. And this is kind of interesting up above Jesus. So, and the woman really confuses me, because what I read was that she was Rachel weeping for her children. We have that reference in Matthew's gospel that because they are no more, and how Matthew brings that forward from not just a statement of Rachel in Jeremiah, but a statement of the mothers in Bethlehem as King Herod killed the baby boys trying to get rid of Jesus. But if that's supposed to be Rachel weeping for her children, she looks really happy to me. I don't quite understand that. But at any rate, this is ordinarily in many of the other paintings we saw the angels attending to Jesus, but he's replaced the angels with Jewish ancestors that I think I have it somewhere. Yeah. I don't. I thought I had some some notes that said specifically which Old Testament figures those might be. Though I almost wonder if the one straight above Jesus' head might be Moses, but that's pure speculation on my part. So Jesus being King of the Jews, being King of the ones suffering the world's persecution against Jews. It really doesn't have that hope that Rualt had, where he portrayed suffering, and to reach out to the sufferers and say that Christ is all of our hope. Where Chagall is painting this suffering in a very hopeless way to get the world to give the Jewish people hope to turn the world around, if you will.
Pastor,
Yeah.
would you enlarge the boats?
Yeah,
I'm curious about that. Okay,
that's
those
as
would be,
close as I can get.
yeah. And then would you go up to the top where the red flags are?
Yeah.
Other side.
Oh, right. The crowds. Yeah, I looked to see if there might be some Nazi insignia or something. Really wasn't.
Yeah,
No.
no, the red would be the Soviets, and of course
Oh, right, being from Belarus.
Yeah, the Soviets would have pushed back against with that. So
Yeah. Mark was not his born name, Moishe, very Jewish name, but when he moved from Belarus and in his career in France, then he took on the French name. So yeah, the Soviet flag, he would have had personal experience with that.
Yeah, because the figures are very much the clothing is very much the Eastern. There would be Jewish people, but from the Eastern, Russia and the satellite states. So, yeah.
Oh.
But clearly in the area where the Nazi troops came in, and there were many atrocities committed. So
Yeah. I'm just looking at this figure going into the synagogue, and now that looks like, it looks like an armband there. I mean, it was the right time historically.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. So while being Jewish, he did work, and this was an interesting theme too. I kept running into similar things going on, where Chagall was a worker in stained glass as well. And in fact, among other places, he produced stained glass windows at the UN, and also at two cathedrals in France, the one at Reims and the one at Metz. Yeah, Metz. So even being Jewish, the church recognized his talent, and I didn't see a reference to when, if it might have been post. I was almost curious if it was post-war, post-World War II reconstruction, that they had some windows out and they called him in to do the work afterwards. I don't know, but anyway, that was kind of interesting to me that him and Rualt both had this stained glass artistry in their background. Very, very different. Okay, so now for something completely different. Salvador Dali, which is about the only, before I started this, the only modern artist that I knew the name of. The one of his best known, Christ on the Cross, his Lord, his Last Supper painting is one that just sticks out in my head, and his he's got one of Christ in the sepulcher, resting in the tomb. It's a very short but wide painting. I didn't look up, I haven't never looked up dimensions for that, but you see the length of Jesus' dead body lying in repose, just, like it's resting from all its hard work and is ready to get up the next morning, Easter Sunday. But if that one by Tissot was the perspective of Jesus looking down, this one is the perspective of God the Father looking down on the cross itself. And it's very, in a very Dali way, he puts things together in strange and unusual manners. So you have Jesus on the cross here, and then you have boats, and I would guess reference to Peter and James and John, the fishers of men. I wouldn't go patterning my Christian life after Dali, but he does have a unique perspective on things that makes us think a little bit. I did want to mention the Chagall painting was 5 by 4 foot, 4.5 foot. So that was a pretty good sized painting. So we kind of are working small to large tonight. And I got spoiled with the sun going down later when Zoom started. There was plenty of light to be able to read my notes, and now I'm in the darkness. I need to go turn on the light. Much better. So this one, 6 foot tall. No, that's the next one. This one is even taller. This one was 80 inches. So what's that? My brain just stopped on me. 5 to, what's that? Almost 7 feet tall. 45 inches wide. Christ of St. John of the Cross, 1951. It's in Glasgow now, an art gallery there. There was a drawing of Jesus on the cross, and I didn't look that up to post it, but there's a drawing of Jesus on the cross from around the time of Luther, 1550, that Dali saw and inspired him to create this one. There's some suggestions of triangles of Christ on the cross, very triangular in shape. There's also some suggestions of circles, and so those things come together in Christian iconography as a reference to the Trinity. Apparently, some mischievous ones that want to see evil in things have speculated that you could see a bull's head, and the bull's head, if you look, and I can see where they wanted to say that they could, looking at Jesus' body, and the bull's head in religious work with the horns and everything has kind of a, or goat's head has kind of a satanic meaning to it in symbolism, but I think they're looking for something that they want to be there, just being mischievous. Dali claims to have been inspired by a cosmic dream in which he saw in Christ that very unity of the universe. Yeah, I wonder what else, I look at Dali paintings and I wonder what else inspired him. I'm thinking he has some chemical help with some of the things he painted. Body of water is, this is interesting. The body of water is actually the bay that Dali lived at, the bay of Port Ligat. So he's bringing Christ to look down on where Dolly lives. That's an interesting, who does Dolly say that Jesus is? Um, and it's interesting how the foot of the cross kind of merges into the clouds. I never really noticed that before, but it almost has a suggestion of a cross of the cloud is dissected, and you're getting like a cloud cut away. Jesus almost in heaven on the cross, looking down on and watching over Dolly and where he lives. There's this strange perspective of Christ almost being parallel to the land instead of perpendicular, sticking up from the ground down at the bottom. I'm pointing to, can you see my finger? Down at the bottom. It's at a different angle from the land.
It gives me the sense of being suspended above.
Yeah.
And in many ways, like, if you look at the crucifix in the front of our church,
Mm-hmm.
There's a fixed point.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at a crucifix suspended, for example, as, on your neck as a necklace,
Mm-hmm.
or something suspended above.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you for me, the strong sense of looking down.
Mm-hmm.
So this is almost the logical conclusion to lift high the cross, the love of Christ proclaimed.
Oh.
Doesn't it look like the head of the cross is closer to you and the foot of the cross is like it's more at an angle, not perpendicular?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and the posture of Jesus there too, with his head coming out at us. It is, look at the size of Jesus' feet compared to the size of his head.
Mhm.
And so that lends exactly to what you're saying, Carol, that the head is appearing to be closer to us and the feet appearing to be further away from us.
It's not hanging straight down, it's tilted.
Yeah, it looks that way.
Yeah, and I've been in churches, Glenn, like you were referring to, where is like ours, like you said, is attached to the wall. But I've also been in churches where there's a cross that hangs from the ceiling. I don't know, Carol, if Matt ever told you or if he heard ever, but the reference to the less than holy, but not unholy name for the crucifix at the St. Louis Seminary is Gumby Jesus.
I never heard that one.
He might have heard, he might not have, I don't know. But anyway, because it's a steel cross, and then there's a steel kind of like sort of S shape. Our kids at school went on a field trip up to St. Louis Seminary for Lutheran Schools Week, and so we go to chapel, and then after chapel, and so I think we were supposed to sing, but then something went sideways and we got off the schedule. But we stayed after and we sang anyway, and a couple of people, professors and others, stayed after chapel and heard us. And I can't remember if that was a day Matt Harrison was there or not, but Dr. Norman Nagel, one of the professors, was there, and he appreciated it. And he came up. You could just tell he was one of those that loves kids. And anyway, so then he went all about explaining the different things in the chapel to us, and he pointed, I'll never forget, he pointed. It really helped me because I was a student at Fort Wayne. I don't think we have a crucifix at all. We have a cross, but we don't have a crucifix, I don't think. But anyway, I had heard my friends talk about Gumby Jesus, and like I said, it's not anti-holy, but it's not exactly a holy reference. And anyway, so Dr. Nagel explains that it was a visual represent in very well done, better than I could do, explains to these kids that it was John 3. Well, really, it was Numbers 21. Um, and Jesus in John 3, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so also the Son of Man must be lifted up. And so it was representing Jesus being lifted up on the cross, like that serpent in the wilderness that Moses had lifted up. And so, of course, it was an S shape. It was the snake on the pole. And it's like, wow. I don't know what the kids got out of that visit. I don't know that any of them remember anything from that at all, but I was just floored in amazement and wonder and awe.
Did Dr. Nagel mention I'm assuming this is in the new chapel.
Yes.
Yeah. Did Dr. Nagel mention anything about the organ, where it was from?
He might have, but I was so busy being amazed and astounded by the snake on the cross instead of Gumby that I didn't
I mentioned that
remember much else.
Yeah, I mentioned that because it's one of the premier pipe organ makers in the world is the Casavet Frere organ makers in Quebec. And
oh, okay.
So
it's Canadian.
It's a Canadian instrument. The technicians from Casavet Frere is Casavet Brothers. They've been making organs since I think the 1800s or 19th century.
Okay.
And their technicians came down and spent several months installing it there.
I do know that the chapel was about the 1990s, I think, was when it was made. Yeah. Now, they wanted to match the stones from the classroom buildings, but there's one huge problem, that those quarries where those stones were taken for the classroom buildings had pretty much gone out of business. So what it was at least somewhere around 100 years or so since the previous buildings have been built. And so how do you match stones? Well, they actually had a great solution. They found some old breweries that were out of business and abandoned that were quarried from the same quarry. So they just basically recycled the stones from the same quarry, but had built different structures, took the structures down, brought the stones over, built the chapel. So that was kind of interesting to learn about that. The other thing I remember about Dr. Nagel was he went through the biblical windows and how the word of God starts in Jerusalem and it moves to Corinth and it moves to Rome and it moves to Wittenberg and it moves to the New World. I think, I can't remember for sure, but I think one of the windows might have been Perry County. And so I remember him connecting that to Luther's statement about the gospel being like a passing rain shower. It's here watering the earth one day, but it moves, and so we see that. We see hotbeds of Christianity rise up and are powerful. And we see that shrink and decline in other areas. And you go to Germany today and they have great cathedrals that are empty. And Europe is just ahead of us here in North America. But then you go to Madagascar and there's more Lutherans in Madagascar than there are in North America. As the gospel rain showers seem to have moved on to Africa, which was one of the early hotbeds of Christianity and then died off. And God's always doing his work that he says to Elijah, Elijah, you're not the only one. I've reserved 7,000 who have not kneeled to Baal. That's kind of going back to Rualt, Christ is with us in our suffering. But maybe we're thinking that things are worse and creating more suffering for us when we get so myopic and nearsighted. And we should be sorrowful over the state of Christianity here as we see it on the decline, and we recognize what people are missing, the great treasures and wonders of to cite Rualt, to see here on earth, Jesus with us in the midst of our suffering, and how that helps us through our days and our moments, and not to suffer without hope, but to suffer with great hope, knowing not only is he with us, but he'll see us through. Here, Salvador Dali, Christ looking down on us, watching over us. I do want to say this, that this really, it's almost like two paintings in a way, because the top half is so dark with the, even that dark shadow behind Christ's hands and arms across the beam. It really reminds me of that one very almost quiet painting we looked at last week that was so black, except for Christ was so lit up. Different angle we're looking at Jesus from, but the lighting and the colors just really throw me back to that painting. Can't remember the artist's name for the life of me. Whoops, didn't mean to scroll to zoom out. So this is also Salvador Dali. Very different. So this one, 76 inches by 48 inches. So basically my height. I'm painting my height. All these cubes, the nails, well, sort of nails, and they're going through weird spots on Jesus. The cross being made of cubes, the ground. Here in this mid ground is almost checkerboard, but I mean, it's hard to even figure what. So one thing I suggested was this was actually the goddess Gaia rather than any sort of biblical figure. The stark, lifeless landscape, there is a hint in the background of some opening in sky. My notes say that this represents or reflects Dali's fascination with mathematics and with science. Kind of I guess the term nuclear mysticism. The cross is a tesseract, a cube taken representatively to the fourth dimension, what Dali described as metaphysical transcendent cubism. He has all these technical terms. All the other paintings I could kind of speak off the cuff and only needed the notes barely, but there's all these words like I don't even know what that means. No nails, no blood. Christ is joined to the tesseract with no visible means, reflecting Dali's mystical union between science and religion. It's hard to see, but there are some, and that's as far as or as close as we can get. In his knees, there are some figures of something. I have no clue. This is 5 different images of Dali's mistress / wife, Gaia, on Christ's right knee, and no, not the goddess Gaia, but the woman, and 5 superimposed images of Dali on left knee. So one knee is his mistress / wife. The other is Dali himself. I'll have to take his word for it because I'm not seeing it. And then that's his mistress / wife down there. Dali's use of the hypercube or tesseract is intended to convey the incomprehensible transcendence of God. Christ is a human form of God that's comprehensible to people within the confines of space or time. So the title of this one is Corpus Hypercubus. Corpus is, a corpus is the Latin term for body. So if we were hearing, or if we were doing Mass or Lord's Supper in Latin, I would be saying, "Hoc est corpus meum." This is my body, which has a connection to something you might be familiar with, hocus pocus. So the story goes, as I heard it from one of my professors, that what was the Lord's Supper? It was, for a lot of people, a bunch of hocus pocus, that magically it goes from being bread, but then it's turned into Christ's body. And so magicians say the words hocus pocus because they're turning one thing into another. But hoc est corpus meum is where my professor said that hocus pocus term came from. Anyway, so corpus, body, but Dolly uses it as he does. He uses things to twist meanings around and twist imagery around. Corpus also refers to geometric figures as well, apparently. Here's another suspended cross. It's free floating in midair. You can see the bottom of it underneath it. Let's see, Christ's face, just like Christ's face in the other one was turned away from the viewer, but that one looking down upon the earth, this one, his face completely turned away from us, looking up towards heaven. We saw a little bit of that in previous paintings as well. Just a little bit of trivia. Ayn Rand declared this to be her favorite painting and meditated for hours before it at the Met. So, not my favorite painting of Jesus, but that's kind of where art goes. Art goes places that we're not necessarily going to be comfortable with, and gets us to look at things in different ways than maybe we would have expected. See things in different ways. In my previous parish, there was a funeral of a man about my age, and the congregation was vacant at the time, and so my circuit visitor was basically their vacancy pastor. And the brother of the deceased was member of mine, and between the family and Pastor Neville and myself, we worked out that Pastor Neville wasn't able to be there for the visitation, and so the family and Pastor Neville asked me, would I be willing to meet with the family before the visitation and give a devotion? Sure. So then I went to the funeral as well, and this man was a photographer and painter, and it was really a beautiful sermon that Pastor Neville preached on how this man helped us to see the beauty that God has put into creation, and reproduce that beauty in his paintings and in his photography. And I really had a whole different view of artistry and photography after that. Just was something that I never would have thought of otherwise, except for, and I never would have been at the funeral otherwise either, except for, like I said, the deceased, the deceased was at a vacant congregation, and they asked if I would do the visitation since Pastor Neville couldn't. And so anyway, it's 8:07. There's lots more art we could cover, but this was a good little survey going through history. Glenn, what were you?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts on Dolly. He was, of course, a surrealist with that, and he was Spanish. And the author Dan Brown, who wrote the Da Vinci Code and all of those, his latest book focuses, his latest novel focuses on surrealism and the art form in Spain. From what I understand, the Spanish National Cathedral is very surrealist. The architect did that, and so when you said it's not your favorite, you know, uh, the whole idea of surrealism, you know, how it um, with the earlier pictures, we knew what we were dealing with. We were looking for this, you know, the passion story, and the paintings gave them to us. This one, we really have to look at what the passion story is and how it, you know, how Dolly would like us to see it. And,
Yeah. Yeah. The other ones were much more accessible.
yeah.
Like I said, the other ones I could kind of study them, read a little bit, and then repeat it back. You know, I was thinking about that. In many ways, it was like I was studying for 6 oral exams in school. Only now thinking, and I had 2 teachers in the audience. This one, it's I couldn't do this one without, you know, basically just reading straight up the notes, because there's just it's so different.
Well, if you notice on the back, as I looked at it, you know, Christ is suspended on the front part, like the front cube, but there is symmetry. There is a cube in the back in the same.
Yeah, I saw
You know,
that.
so then my question, if I could ask the artist, who then would be on the back face if the artist were to put somebody suspended there?
Oh, that's an
You know,
interesting question. I like it.
would it be Abraham? Would it be Adam? Would it be you know, who would be on the other face?
Yeah. Well, what
Yeah.
I'm really
You know,
curious about
you're
is
going to stay up. You're going to spend all night thinking about that.
well, at least until my program comes on at 10 o'clock. But
And then
this
we'll
one,
hear you yell, "Eureka, Eureka!"
yeah. You know, now that you know, from the notes, knowing that the figure, you know, his face and his mistress/wife's face are in the knees. You know, there's some bit of detail at his elbow here too.
Yeah.
But really, I want to know about is these 4 cube, well, not really full cubes, but these 4 right here, and why Christ is, you know, off to the side. It makes sense seeing him centered on the back cross. You know, even the shadow is only slightly askew. You know, his feet look very centered on those cubes, but that then puts him way off by our perspective on the front cube. And you know, the 3 go through him or are floating in front of him, and what's he trying to get at with that? And then the 1 isn't anywhere near him. You know, so what's he getting at with that? Yeah.
Anyway, good.
Yeah. So anyway, it has been, I've learned. I hope you all have learned something. I've got a greater appreciation. And actually, last week with the confirmation kids, we, you know, as part of that, we watched a video, and of all things, one of the crosses that we had looked at previously, one of the paintings showed up in that video. I'm like, hey, I know that video, I know that painting now, and I know something about the painter. I know why it was painted. Oh, this is great. um, uh, if anything, I'm more confused about Dolly than I ever was. uh, uh, you know, I love the previous one, but again, I wonder if that's, again, like we were saying, it's much more accessible, much more realistic. This is very surreal. I mean, even in its surrealism in the previous one, it's not this. But anyway, so we head into Holy Week next week, so we'll get into that drama then, and look forward to Easter. So let's close with prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for being patient. I don't understand why I have had trouble every week, but thank you.
It's okay.
I enjoyed it. I'm glad I got there anyway.
It was worth it to have you with us, Carol. It was.
Well, thank you.
So,
Thank you very much for your work. It was most interesting. Wow, I have never considered it from an artistic standpoint, so it was excellent.
To be honest, and to give credit where credit is due, a friend of mine, William Swirlo, is the one who put this together as a retreat for other pastors, and he mailed out his presentation. I'm like, oh, I could do something with this. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to go over it with you all. So anyway,
you can leave out that last one though.
Not to come up with something for Lent 2022.
Okay. I'll work on my Zoom.
Yeah, hopefully in person, right? Exactly.
That's true.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to sign off.
Okay.
Yep. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.